and that's just fine. I'm seeing red, Jake said, addressing the group. Jake, take Arquette and Marcia a piece toward the house, then hurry back. Marcia held tightly onto Arquette's arm, struggling to keep up with Jake's rapid pace. Arquette stumbled and spoke incoherently, causing Marcia to worry. She begged him to come home with her, and they both hurried down the slope. As they looked back, the crowd appeared bunched and motionless, which gave them some relief. Arquette seemed to relax and even asked Jake to let go of him, saying his arm hurt. Jake reminded Arquette of the time he punched him and told him he was sorry for handling him roughly. Arquette, weak and spent, did not respond or even look at Marcia. Jake halted and looked back, saying it was far enough and that no one was coming. He instructed Arquette to head to the house with Marcia, assuring her not to worry about them. Marcia held onto Arquette's arm and walked as fast as she could down the lane, telling him she had kept his coat. She felt a mix of emotions, proud of him but also afraid and sickened. Arquette walked dejectedly and weakly, with a face as white as a sheet. Suddenly she felt a warm, wet liquid trickle down her hand. It was blood. She shuddered but didn't let go. After a moment she asked, "Are you hurt?" "I don't know," he replied, "but the blood—" He held up his hands, revealing bloody knuckles and a badly cut forearm. "The gun cut me. And he bit me too," he explained, his voice apologetic. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "Don't worry about me," she murmured, trying to keep her composure. "Are you okay now?" "I'll be fine," he said. "But that was Stone, the IWW agitator and German agent. He burned my wheat and took everything from me." "I know, Stan," she whispered. "I meant to kill him." He looked at her with piercing, gloomy eyes. "Why should you care? Someone has to kill him." "Don't talk like that," she implored. "I'm glad you didn't. Surely you're glad too." "I don't know," he admitted. "There's a beast in men in me. I had a gun in my pocket, and I wanted to feel his flesh tear, his bones break, his blood spurt." "Stan!" she cried, horrified. "That was the Hun in me," he declared bitterly. "Oh, my friend, don't say that," she pleaded. "You make me— There's no Hun in you." "That's what ails me," he replied. "You were pushed to the brink. You acted like any man who had been wronged. You fought back. He tried to kill you. I saw the gun. No one could blame you. I had my own reason for asking Dad to stop you from killing him, a selfish woman's reason, but I tell you I was so furious, so worked up, that if it had been any other man I would have let you kill him." "Marcia, I don't understand you," replied Arquette, his voice shaking with emotion. "But I appreciate you for understanding why I had to stand up for myself." "It's nothing." "Oh, you're bleeding. Does it hurt?" "I feel nothing, no pain at all, except for the dying down of what must have been hell." They arrived at the house and went inside. No one was around, which Marcia was thankful for. "I'm glad my mother and sisters won't see you," she said, rushing. "Go to your room, I'll bring bandages." He followed her instructions without protest. Marcia searched for the necessary items to treat his wound and ran upstairs. Arquette was sitting in a chair holding his arm, and blood was dripping onto the floor. He smiled at her. "You would make a pretty Red Cross nurse," he said. Marcia placed a bowl of water on the floor and knelt beside him, taking his arm and beginning to clean it. He winced, and the blood covered her fingers. "My blood on your hands," he exclaimed morbidly. "German blood." "Stan, you're out of your mind," snapped Marcia hotly. "If you dare to say that again, I'll—" She cut herself off. "What will you do?" Marcia faltered. What could she do? Sooner or later a revelation had to come, and the tension was beginning to wear on her. She was stirred to her core, and her instincts were kicking in. No gentle sympathy would work with this tragic young man. He had to be taken by force. Some of the violence he had shown toward Stone seemed necessary to make him forget himself. His mind was consumed with a singular focus. Even when she had made it blatantly obvious that she loved him, he couldn't see it. This blindness was unbearable. "Stan Arquette, don't you dare say that again." She stopped tending to his arm and looked up at him, her face suddenly pale. "I'm sorry, I'm just bitter," he muttered. "Please don't mind me. You're so kind to do this for me." In silence, Marcia dressed his wound. Even though her heart was racing, her hands were steady and efficient. He thanked her, but his moody eyes were focused far beyond her. "When I'm lying over there with—" "If you go," she interrupted. He was hopeless. "You should rest a little," she suggested. "I wonder what happened to Stone," he mused. "So do I. It worries me," she replied. "Weren't there a lot of cowboys with guns?" "Yes, so many that there's no need for you to go out and start another fight." "I did start it, didn't I?" "Yes, you certainly did." She left him then, reminding him to please be quiet and not seek out those agitated men again. He smiled, but he couldn't make any promises. For Marcia, time seemed to stretch on endlessly between fear and anticipation. From her window, she watched a chaotic crowd make their way down the lane towards the main road. No one was working in the fields. During lunch, only her mother and sisters were present. Word had come that the IWW men were being forced out of many waters. Mrs. Smith fretted, and even Marcia's sisters were uncharacteristically quiet. The house was lifeless all afternoon, with no one coming or going. Marcia listened intently for any sound. She was relieved to know that Arquette had stayed in his room. She hoped that the looming trouble had been avoided, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. It was almost time for supper when she heard the men returning. A group of men arrived, their voices loud and their movements hesitant, as if they didn't want to leave each other's company. The sound of horses entering the barn and the driver's boisterous voices reached her ears. When she descended the stairs, she came across her father, who looked impressive and triumphant. Marcia wasn't fooled by his attempt to avoid her questions. She sensed that he wouldn't give her any information this time. He only said that everything was fine and that the IWW men were going to be deported from Washington. He refused supper and had a low-voiced conversation with Arquette, which Marcia couldn't hear. She wanted to know what was going on, but Arquette's voice, when he said, "Smith, I'll go," was menacing and frightening. Marcia thought of the vigilantes her father had organized. Dinner was difficult. Arquette ate a little and then left, making an excuse to go back to his room. Marcia finished her meal somehow and went outside, where she met Jake. When she asked him about what was happening, she knew that something unusual had happened or was about to happen. She begged and cajoled, but Jake was difficult to persuade. Marcia's need to know increased as he made more excuses and avoided her questions. Eventually she wore him down. He couldn't resist her tears, which flowed despite her efforts to control them. "Listen here, Miss Marcia, do you care for young Arquette?" asked Jake. "Care for him? Jake, I love him." "Then take my advice and keep him with you tonight." "Does Father want Stan Arquette to go wherever he's going?" "Well, I should think so. Your dad likes the way Arquette handles IWWs," replied Jake significantly. "Vigilantes," Marcia whispered. Chapter 20. Marcia was anxiously waiting for Stan, her heart beating rapidly as she stood partially hidden behind the curtains. She had come to the realization that she was about to face a difficult situation. As she heard his footsteps on the stairs, Marcia called out a greeting before revealing herself. "Hey there! Oh, you scared me!" he exclaimed, clearly taken aback by the sudden meeting. His face was pale and determined, indicating that he had been deep in thought. He stopped in front of her. "Where are you headed?" Marcia asked. "To see your dad," he replied, hesitating slightly. "What for?" she inquired. "It's pretty important," he said, still unsure. "Will you be gone long?" He seemed embarrassed. "We'll probably be busy all evening." "Really? Fine. If you'd rather be busy than spend the night with me." Marcia turned away, trying to act hurt and indifferent. "Marcia, that's not it," he protested. "I'd rather spend time with you than anyone else or do anything." "It's easy to say that, Mr. Arquette," she responded lightly. "But it's true," he insisted. "Come inside, Dad might hear us," she said, leading him into the room. It was dimly lit, but enough light fell on his face to leave hers in shadow. "I made an appointment for tonight," he said, struggling to get the words out. "Can't you cancel it?" she asked. "No, that would make me look like a coward and maybe even upset your dad." "Stan Arquette, sometimes it's brave to give up certain things, and if you go, you'll make me angry." "Go where?" he exclaimed, staring at her. "Oh, I see. You'd rather go hang out with the IWW than stay here with me," she said, her composure faltering slightly. She was trying to be honest and open with him, hoping that they could understand each other without any pretense. She just wanted to be able to put everything on the table and deal with it honestly. But she had to work for it. Her main challenge was feeling like she was being dishonest. She didn't have time to plan, so she had to try to change his mind on the spot. His heart skipped a beat at her words. "Then you know?" he asked, surprised. Of course, she replied. I'm sorry for that, he said solemnly, running his hand through his wet hair. But you will stay home? She shook her head. No, she said firmly, looking him straight in the eye. Stan, I don't want you mixed up with any lynching bees, she pleaded. I'm a citizen of Washington. I'll join the vigilantes. I'm American. I've been ruined by these IWWs. No man in the West has lost so much. Father Homeland, my great harvest of wheat. Why shouldn't I go? There's no reason except me, she replied, her voice unsteady. He stood up straight and took a deep breath as if preparing himself. That's a mighty good reason, but you will be kinder if you withdraw your objections. Can't you understand why I beg you not to go? She asked desperately. I can't, he replied, staring at her. Every moment he spent with her seemed to have a greater impact on him. Marcia could feel this, and it gave her the courage she needed. Stan, you've made a terrible and horrible mistake, she said, her voice shaking. My heavens, what have I done? He gasped, his face going pale. The moment had come. Even if she lost her ability to speak, she had to show him what his mistake was. Nothing in her life had ever been as difficult as this. But as the words formed in her mind, her heart pushed them out. She hoped he wouldn't misunderstand. Then she looked him straight in the eye and spoke. Her first attempt was incoherent, but her second was a whisper. Didn't you ever think that I might care for you? It was as if a jolt went through him, leaving him trembling, but he didn't look surprised, only incredulous. I never did care for you, he said. Well, that's your mistake because I do. You never asked me. What do you mean by that? Marcia was feeling many emotions, but the strongest was the desire to escape. She also wanted to hide her face on his chest. She could see that he had turned white and was acting strangely. His hands were shaking and his eyes were piercing her soul. What should a girl mean when she says she cares? I don't know. Girls are beyond me, he replied stubbornly. I felt so far beyond you that I had to come to this. Stan, he burst out hoarsely, you're talking in riddles. You've been acting strange, yet so sweet and fine. And now you say you care for me? What does that mean? This word can drive me mad, but I never dared to hope. I love you, love you, love you. My God, you're all I have left to love. Do you think you have a monopoly on all the love in the world? Interrupted Marcia, coming back to her senses. His passionate declaration was all she needed. Her ordeal was over. It seemed like he couldn't believe his ears or eyes. Monopoly? World? He echoed. Of course not, but, Stan, I love you just as much as you love me, so there. Marcia had time for one look at his face before he hugged her tightly. What a relief to hide her own. Her eyes shut and she felt hot tears under her eyelids. Everything before her was a blur of confusion and chaos. She felt like she couldn't breathe, but strangely she didn't need to. How happy she felt. It was a moment that seemed to last an eternity, full of changing emotions that brought her relief and joy. Soon Stan began to regain his senses. He let go of Marcia, but still kept his arm around her as he looked at her. Marcia, can I have a kiss? He whispered. Marcia felt overjoyed at the sound of his voice in her ear. She had changed the world for Stan Arquette. Yes, in a moment, she replied with a nervous laugh. Let me catch my breath first. I was beside myself, and I still am, he said in a low voice. I feel like I've been lifted to heaven. It's hard to believe. I want you to kiss me so I can be sure that it's real. You're Marcia Smith, the girl of my dreams. Do you really love me? Yes, Stan, I do, she replied, looking up at him. His face was shining with happiness. Marcia felt a deep and intense emotion overwhelm her. Then please kiss me, he said. Marcia blushed and lifted her face. They kissed, and then she rested her head on his shoulder as he asked her 1,000 questions. He was bewildered and overjoyed, and he couldn't believe that it was true. Marcia laughed and explained everything to him, telling him how and when it all started. Hours passed by, and Stan still couldn't believe his luck. I forgot about the vigilantes, he suddenly said. It's too late now. Time has flown by so fast. Oh, Marcia, other thoughts are creeping in, alas. He kissed her hand and got up. His mood had changed again. Marcia knew that this moment was coming. Yes, you forgot about your appointment with my dad and the vigilantes. You missed some excitement and violence, she said. His face turned pale and serious. May I talk to your father? He asked. Yes, she replied. If I come back from the war unscathed, will you promise to marry me? Stan asked Marcia with a hopeful glint in his eye. "Stan, I promise you now," Marcia replied with a gentle smile. "But Marcia, it's not fair to you. I don't think a soldier should tie a girl down with marriage or engagement before he goes off to war. She should be free." "I want you to be free," Stan said, concern etched on his face. "That's for you to say," Marcia said softly. "But for my part, I don't want to be free if you go away to war." I'm going," Stan said, his voice trailing off. "You don't want to be free?" Marcia asked, her eyes searching his face. "Marcia, would you be engaged to me?" Stan blurted out, unable to contain his emotions. "Of course, my dear boy, it seems I already am," Marcia laughed, her eyes twinkling. "Would you marry me before I go?" Stan asked, his voice cracking. "Yes," Marcia replied, a determined look on her face. Overwhelmed with emotion, Stan stumbled towards Marcia, almost on his knees, and expressed his gratitude, wonder, and passion. He also acknowledged the terrible temptation he must resist and begged for her help. "Stan, I love you. I will see things through your eyes if I must. I want to be a comfort to you, not a source of sorrow," Marcia said, her voice filled with love and understanding. "But Marcia, what comfort can I find? To leave you now is going to be horrible. To part from you now I don't see how I can," Stan said, his voice breaking. Then Marcia broached a delicate and momentous subject. "You need not part from me. My father has asked me to try to keep you home. He secured exemption for you. You are more needed here than at the front. You can feed many soldiers. You would be doing your duty with honor. You would be a soldier. The government is going to draft young men for farm duty. Why not you? There are many good reasons why you would be better than most young men. Because you know wheat." Wheat had become the most important thing in the world. Loyalty was not misjudged. The best service to the country was doing what one could do best. Stan sat down next to Marcia with a serious frown and somber eyes. "Marcia, are you asking me not to go to war?" he asked. "Yes, I am," she replied. "I have thought it all over. I've given up my brother. I wouldn't ask you to stay home if you were needed at the front as much as here. That question I have had out with my conscience. Stan, don't think I'm a silly, sentimental girl. Recent events have made me a woman." He buried his face in his hands. "That's the most amazing thing, Marcia Smith, my American girl asking me not to go to war." "But dear, it is not so amazing. It's reasonable. Your peculiar point of view makes it look different. I am no weak, timid, lovesick girl afraid to let you go. I've given you good, honorable, patriotic reasons for your exemption from draft. Can you see that? Yes, I grant all your claims. I know wheat well enough to tell you that if vastly more wheat raising is not done, the world will starve. That would hold good for the United States in 40 years without war." "Then if you see my point, why are you opposed to it?" she asked. "Because I am Stan Arquette," he replied bitterly. His tone and gloom made her shiver. It would take all her intelligence and wit and reason to understand him, and vastly more than that to change him. She thought earnestly. This was to be an ordeal profoundly more difficult than the confession of her love. It was indeed a crisis dwarfing the other she had met. She sensed in him a remarkably strange attitude toward this war compared to that of her brother or other boys she knew who had gone. "Because you are Stan Arquette," she said thoughtfully. "It's all in the name," he said. But to Marcia it was a pretty name, a good name. He had agreed to take it as his own for life. He couldn't answer her when she asked him why he had to go to war just because he was Stan Arquette. His hand shook as he reached out blindly for hers, and she felt the turmoil inside him. Marcia was shocked, but a great tenderness flooded over her. She promised to be true to him, to crush her own selfish hopes, and to be his mother. She begged him to tell her why he had to go to war. "My father was German," he said. "He hated this country, yours and mine. He plotted with the IWW, he hated your father and wanted to destroy him. Before he died, he realized his crime. But all the same, he was a traitor to my country. I bear his name. I have German in me, and by God, I'm going to pay." His deep, passionate tones struck into Marcia's heart. She fought a rising terror as she began to understand him. She prayed for inspiration and wisdom. "How will you pay?" she asked. "In the only way possible. I'll see that an Arquette goes to war who will show his American blood, who will fight and kill and be killed." His passion went beyond patriotism. It came from the very core of his being. He had a debt to pay, but there was more to his determination. Marcia sensed that it had to do with his German blood. He hated himself for it, and to keep him from going to war would make him doubt his manhood and eventually despise himself. No longer could she convince him to stay home. She had to put her own desires aside. She realized that she had the power to keep him, but knew she must not use it. This was a matter of his soul. If he went to war with the wrong motive, driven by a passionate desire to spill blood that he hated, he would lose his soul. He needed to change. All her love and womanly intuition focused on this fact. How strange it was that she was given this choice. Not only must she give up hope of keeping him home, but she may have to go to extreme measures to send him away with a changed spirit. The moment of decision was agonizing. "Stan, this is a terrible hour for both of us," she spoke. "But thank goodness you have confessed to me. Now I will confess to you." "Confess? You? What are you talking about?" he responded in shock, lifting his head from his hands to look at her. "When we came in here, I was determined to make you stay home. Father begged me to do it, and I had my own selfish motive. It was love. Oh, Stan, I love you more than you can imagine," she exclaimed, flinging her arms around his neck. "I justified my plan to make you stay, but really I just wanted you. I wanted your love, your presence. I dreamed of a home with you as my husband, master, and father to my children. I was terrified at the thought of you going to war. You might be hurt or killed. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, so I planned to do everything in my power to make you stay." "Marcia, what you're saying is crazy," he cried. The moment of decision was agonizing, but Marcia knew what she had to do. "Oh, I could have kept you," she exclaimed, her voice low and triumphant. "It brings me so much joy. Tell me I could have kept you. Tell me." "Yes, I couldn't resist you, but I might have hated it." "Hush. It's all in the past. I've risen above myself." "Marcia, you distress me. A little while ago you bewildered me with your sweetness and love. Now you look like an angel or a goddess. Oh, to have your face with me always. Yet it distresses me so terribly on purpose. What are you about to tell me?" "I see something." "Listen," she interrupted. "I meant to make you weak. I implore you now to be strong. You must go to war. But with all my heart and soul I beg you to go with a changed spirit. You were about to do a terrible thing. You hated the German in you and meant to kill it by violence. You despised the German blood and you meant to spill it. Like a wild man you would have rushed to fight, to stab and beat, to murder, and you would have left your breast open for a bayonet thrust. Oh, I know it. Stan, you are horribly wrong. That is no way to go to war. War is a terrible business, but men don't wage it for motives such as yours. We Americans all have different strains of blood. English, French, German. One is as good as another. You are obsessed, you are out of your head on this German question. You must kill that idea, kill it with one bayonet thrust of sense. You must go to war as my soldier, with my ideal. Your country has called you to help uphold its honor, its pledged word. You must fight to conquer an enemy who threatens to destroy freedom. You must be brave, faithful, merciful, clean, an American soldier. You are only one of a million. You have no personal need for war. You're just as good, as fine, and as noble as any man I've ever met, sir. Out of all the men in the world, I choose you," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm sending you away. I'm giving you up. Oh, my love, you'll never know how difficult this is for me, but go. Your life has been full of sadness. You've lost so much. I feel in my heart what will happen if you change, if you see God in this situation as I do. Promise me that you'll love what you once hated. Prove to yourself what I believe. Trust me and promise me. Then, oh, I know that God will bring you back to me." He fell to his knees before her, burying his face in her lap. His whole body shook with sobs, and his hands grasped at her dress. "Marcia," he whispered, his voice broken, "I can't see God in this situation for me. I can't make that promise." Chapter 21. Around a lengthy table in a dimly lit room, 30 men with masks on their faces gathered. The light from 2 lanterns revealed the rustic interior of the room, the tough-looking individuals, the hard-set jaws beneath their half-masks, and their large hands stretched out, poised to pull a name from the hat that was being passed around. The conversation was hushed and somber, with no one daring to utter a name. A large man at the head of the table spoke up. "We are 30 chosen men representing our country. Each member here will write their preferred punishment for the IWWs, either death or deportation, on a slip of paper." The masked men bent their faces down and wrote in complete silence. A quiet breeze swept through the room, causing the lanterns to flicker and casting large shadows on the walls. After the papers had been collected and handed back to the leader, he read them aloud. "Deportation," he announced. "That will be the fate of the IWW men. And now we must decide what to do with their leader, Stone. But before we cast our votes, let me share an excerpt from one of his speeches. This is authentic, provided by the detective who has been working with us and has also been published. I read this piece because I want to bring to your attention an issue that goes beyond our own personal fortunes here." The leader leaned towards the flickering light of the lantern and began to read from a slip of paper. "If the militia is sent out here to hinder the IWW, we will make it so difficult for the government that no troops will be able to go to France. I don't care what this country is fighting for. I am fighting for the rights of labor. American soldiers are Uncle Sam's scabs in disguise." The deep voice stopped, and the leader slammed his huge fist on the table. He looked up and down the rows of sinister masked figures and asked, "Do you have anything to say?" One man replied no, while another said, "Pass the slips." Then an elderly man with gray hair got up and spoke. "Neighbors," he began, "I lived here in the early days. For the last few years I've been apologizing for my hometown. I don't want to apologize for it any longer." He sat down, and a current seemed to wave from him around that dark square of figures. The leader cleared his throat as if he had much to say, but he did not speak. Instead, he passed the hat, and each man drew out a slip of paper to write upon it. The action was not slow, and presently the hat returned round the table to the leader. He spilled its contents and with a steady hand picked up the first slip of paper. "Death," he read sonorously and laid it down to pick up another. Again he spoke that grim word. The third brought forth the same, and likewise the next, until the verdict had been called out 30 times. "At daylight we'll meet," boomed out that heavy voice. "Instruct Stone's guards to make a show of resistance. We'll hang Stone to the railroad bridge. Then each of you gets your gangs together. Gather up all the IWWs and take them to the railroad yard. Load them onto an empty train and send it under the bridge where Stone will be hanged. Then we'll escort them out of the country." It was a cool and gray August morning. The town was still asleep, unaware of the approaching danger. Stone was being held in a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Guards patrolled the area, on high alert. Suddenly a group of masked men appeared and overpowered the guards. They broke into the warehouse and dragged Stone out into the daylight. Stone was bound and terrified as he faced the armed men. They informed him that he was to be hanged for his crimes as an IWW member. Stone pleaded for justice, but it was too late. He had already sealed his own fate with his own words. "I ain't no criminal," he protested, his voice shaking with fear. "I got some big interests behind me." But his words were cut off by the sudden tightening of a lasso looped over his head. The men who had captured him dragged him away, ignoring his half-strangled cries. As the sun rose over the fertile valley, the towns below were on high alert. Swift-flying motor cars warned citizens to stay off the streets, while armed forces of men on foot and horseback scoured the area. They stopped anyone they met, interrogating them and checking their identities. Those who could prove their innocence were allowed to go, while others were arrested and marched away. The search was thorough, with special attention given to potential camping spots and hiding places. Old barns and straw stacks were of particular interest. In the towns, every corner was checked for hiding IWW members. As the day progressed, the captured men were herded towards the railroad line, where they were held until a freight train arrived. The train was filled with empty cattle cars, and the IWW members were driven aboard with armed guards following closely behind. The train made frequent stops, and crowds of people lined the tracks, some of them armed with rifles and pistols. They taunted and threatened the prisoners as the train passed. It was a tense and dangerous time, with emotions running high on both sides. But the authorities were determined to root out any threats to the safety and stability of the towns and cities in the area. As the train made its way through the wheat district, it became clear that there were over 300 members of the IWW on board. These suspicious characters were packed into open cars, and by the time the train reached its last stop, their numbers had greatly increased. The armed forces were then cut down to a handful of guards who were tasked with deporting the IWW from the country. At the final stop, provisions and drinking water were loaded into the cars, and amidst the roar of thousands, the train slowly pulled out. However, the train did not immediately gather speed. Instead, the engine whistled a prolonged blast, which was a signal or warning not lost on many of its passengers. From the front cars rose shrill cries that alarmed the prisoners in the rear. The reason for this soon became apparent. As the train approached a high bridge span, the passengers could see a figure of a man hanging from a rope fastened to the center of the bridge. The figure swayed in the wind, and as it turned halfway round, it revealed a ghastly, distorted face and a huge printed placard on the breast. The train slowly drew one carload after another past the suspended body of the dead man. There were no more cries. All were silent in that slow-moving train. All faces were pale, all eyes transfixed. The placard on the hanged man's breast bore a strange message in glaring red. Last warning, March 7th, 77. These figures were the ones used in the frontier days by vigilantes. Chapter 22. As the sun beat down on the dusty road, a sleek motor car chugged its way up the hill towards the Newman Ranch. The ranch wasn't too far from Wade, a small town known for its wheat crops. The hills surrounding the ranch were bare and yellow, with the wheat swaying in the breeze, similar to the Bend country. The car was occupied by 4 men, a driver, and 3 cowboys. As they approached the entrance to the ranch, a towering stone gate loomed ahead, marking the threshold to the Newman property. The roadside was cluttered with various cars and vehicles, and men were bustling in and out of the ranch. Newman's house was modest, but his barns, granaries, and stockhouses were built on a grand scale. "Hey, Bill, you coming in with me to get this guy for the Kaiser?" asked Jake, stretching as the car stopped. He opened the door and got out stiffly. "Give me a horse any day to get places." "Jake, my respect for your reputation as Smith's foreman makes me want to stay in the background," replied Bill. "I've done a lot these last 48 hours. "Well, I reckon you have, Bill, and no mistake. But I was thinking you'd want to see the fun." "Fun? Jake, it'll be enough fun for me to sit here and smoke in the shade and watch you run from that big German devil. They say he's a bad man." "Sure, I know that. All those Germans are bad." "If the boss wasn't so strict about gunplay, I'd love to go with you," responded Bill. "But he didn't give me any orders. You're on your own this time." "Bill, you'd have to take orders from me," said Jake coolly. "Sure, that's why I came with Andy." The other cowboy, Andy, appeared uneasy and said, "Come on, Jake, you're not going to ask me to go in there, and with me hating Germans like I do." "Nope, I think I'll order Bill to go in and get Newman," replied Jake complacently as he made as if to re-enter the car. Bill collapsed in his seat. "Jake," he protested weakly, "this job was given to you because of your reputation for diplomacy. And I don't have any of that. And you, Jake, you're the smoothest and slickest talker that ever came to the Northwest." Jake seemed to have a vulnerable point. He straightened up with a little swagger. "Well, you watch me," he said. "I'll have that big Dutchman eating out of my hand." "Listen up, fellas," said Jake as he approached the group of men. "We got to get Newman back to Many Waters pronto, and I say we scare him good on the way back." The others looked at him skeptically. "How we going to do that?" asked one. Jake just grinned. "Leave that to me." And with that he set off towards the ranch house. Jake had been tasked with bringing Newman back to Many Waters as soon as possible. The cowboy didn't mind the job, even though he pretended to. He knew that Newman hadn't started harvesting yet, but that the harvest hands were expected that day. Jake also knew that the extra force of workers wouldn't be showing up. As he approached the ranch house, Jake caught the eye of the women living there. They seemed curious about him, and he didn't mind the attention. He knew he didn't look like a typical foreman or laborer. With his boots, spurs, gun, sombrero, and scarf, he looked like a true cowboy of the ranges. Jake found out that Newman was out in the fields waiting for the harvest hands. "If he's expecting those IWWs, he'll never harvest," said Jake, "because some of them have been hanged and the rest have run out of the country." Without waiting for a response, Jake strode back towards the fields, taking in the barns, corrals, and fields beyond. Newman's place was large and valuable, but nothing compared to Many Waters. As he approached the wheat fields, Jake could see the engines, combines, threshers, and wagons waiting to begin. Newman strode out from the group of waiting men. He was a big man with a ruddy face, beard, and deep-set eyes. Jake approached Newman and asked, "Are you Newman?" The man gruffly replied, "That's me." Jake continued, "I'm Smith's foreman. I've been sent over to tell you that you're wanted pretty bad at Many Waters." Newman stared at him incredulously and asked, "What? Who wants me?" Jake answered, "Smith, and I reckon there's more, though I ain't informed." Newman cursed under his breath, amazed at the situation. "Smith? Well, I don't want to see him," he replied. Jake coolly responded, "I reckon you don't." Newman examined Jake's appearance, finding his type familiar to Smith but strange to him. The cowboy exuded potential force, with hard, keen eyes and a swinging gun as the least significant thing about his appearance. Newman's face paled slightly. "But I'm going to harvest today," Newman said. "I'm late. I've 100 hands coming." Jake replied, "Nope, you haven't none coming." "It's near 10 o'clock. We run over here powerful fast." Newman bellowed, "Yes, it's near 10. I haven't harvest hands coming. What's this talk?" "Well, about 9:30 I seen all your damned IWWs, except what was shot and hanged, loaded in a cattle car and started out of the country." Jake delivered the biting news. Newman was astonished and afraid, shaking all over his huge frame. "If it's true, what's that to me?" he bluffed in hoarse accents. "Newman, I didn't come to answer questions," Jake said curtly. "My boss just sent me for you, and if you bucked on coming, then I was to say it was your only chance to avoid publicity and being run out of the country." Newman was livid of face now, shouting, "Smith threatens me! Smith suspicions me! God in Himmel! Me he always cheated, and now he insults—" "Say, it ain't healthy to talk like that about my boss," Jake interrupted forcibly, "and we're wasting time." "If you don't come with us, we'll be coming back with the whole crew," threatened Smith. "He means you're going to face his guy." "What guy?" asked Newman. "Arquette, young Arquette, son of old Bert Arquette from the Bend. Arquette has some information for you that you won't want getting out. Smith's being fair with you. If it wasn't for that, I'd be pulling my gun on you. Do you understand?" The mere mention of Arquette made Newman back down. "All right, I'll go," he grumbled. Without a word to his men, he set off with Jake following him. Newman took a shortcut to avoid running into any of his family members. However, some people noticed him on the road and called out in surprise, but he waved them off. "Bill and Andy, make some space for Mr. Newman," instructed Jake, opening the door for the farmer to get in. The two cowboys gave Newman the entire back seat while they squeezed into the smaller side seats. Jake took the driver's seat. "Step on it," he shouted. The car sped off, making conversation impossible until they reached the outskirts of a town where they had to slow down. The cowboys chatted away, paying no attention to Newman. Soon the driver turned onto a road that ran parallel to a railway track for a few miles before crossing it and entering a larger town. The streets were packed with people, causing the car to crawl. At this point, Jake suggested, "Let's head down to the bridge." "Sure," agreed his companions. The driver took them down a street that was even more crowded and sloped downwards, providing a view of the railway tracks. Soon they saw a railway bridge surrounded by a group of people who seemed both excited and fearful. All eyes were fixated on a man swaying in the wind, hanging from a rope tied to the high span of the bridge. "Well, Stone's still hanging there," remarked Jake with a hint of cheer in his voice. Newman, startled by the sight, looked out to see the ghastly figure and slowly sank back in his seat. The cowboys paid him no attention and seemed to have forgotten his presence. "It's funny they cut down all the other IWWs and left Stone hanging there," observed Bill. "Those vigilantes really did a number on them," added Andy. "I was itching to join them, but they never asked me." "Nor me," replied Jake regretfully. "I can't understand why, unless they were afraid I couldn't keep a secret." "Who are those vigilantes, anyhow?" asked Bill curiously. "Well, I reckon nobody knows. But I saw 1,000 armed men this morning. They sure looked bad. You ought to have seen them poking the IWWs with cocked guns," replied Jake. "Was anyone shot?" queried Andy. "Not in the daytime. Nobody was killed by this Citizens Protective League, as they call themselves. They just rounded up all the suspicious men and herded them onto that cattle train and carried them off. It was at night when the vigilantes worked masked and secret and sure bloody. Just like the old vigilante days. And you can bet they aren't through yet." "Uncle Sam won't need to send any soldiers here," remarked Bill. "Well, I should hope not. That'd be a disgrace to the Northwest. "It was a bad time for the IWW to try any tricks on us," said Jake, shaking his head with his jaw bulging. "What gets me worse than those IWWs are the skunks that give Uncle Sam the double cross," said Andy with a dark expression on his face. "I'll show respect to any man who's honest and fights fair, but those sneaky coyotes who live off the land and pretend to be American when they're not make my blood boil," grumbled a cowboy. "I heard the vigilantes have targeted men like them," Bill remarked. "I'll give you a tip, fellas," Jake said grimly. "The West won't tolerate traitors." Throughout the journey to many waters, the cowboys continued to vent their frustration. They only acknowledged Newman's presence when the driver stopped the car in front of Smith's house. "Come on in," Jake said to the sweating rancher as he led him to Smith's study. He knocked on the door, which was answered by Arquette. "Well, here we are," Jake announced nonchalantly, his pride evident. Smith was standing next to his desk, started when he saw his rival and enemy, his hand flashing back significantly. "No gunplay, boss, remember," Jake reminded him. "And Newman isn't armed." Smith struggled to control his rage, but failed. The realization that he could not kill this man may have liberated his passion. The two large ranchers faced each other, Newman livid and shaking, Smith black as a thundercloud. "Newman, you conspired with Stone to kill me," Smith accused bitterly. Newman denied it in a hoarse, brief answer. "Sure, deny it. What do we care? We've got you, Newman," Smith burst out, his heavy voice ringing with passion. "But it's not your low-down plot that's angered me. There have been many men who've tried to do away with me. I've outsmarted you in many deals, so your personal hatred for me doesn't matter. I'm angry because we can't coexist in the same place because you're a traitor. You've lived here for 20 years and gotten rich off the land. You'd sell us out to your rotten Germany? Let me tell you what I think about that." Smith paused to take a deep breath. Then he began to curse Newman. All the rough years of his frontier life, as well as the quieter ones of his ranching days, found expression in the swift, thunderous roll of his terrible scorn. Every vile name that had ever been used by cowboy, outlaw, gambler, leaped to Smith's stinging tongue. All the keen, hard epithets common to the modern day he flung into Newman's face. And he ended with a profanity that was as individual in character as its delivery was intense. "I'm calling you out for my own relief," he concluded, "and not because I expect to get under your skin." Then he paused. He wiped the beaded drops from his forehead, coughed, and shook himself, his big fists unclosed. Passion gave way to dignity. "Newman, it's a pity you and men like you can't see the truth. That's the mystery to me, why anyone who had spent half a lifetime and prospered here in our happy and beautiful country could ever hate it. I will never understand that. But I do understand that America will never harbor such men for long. You have your reasons, I reckon. And no doubt you think you're justified. That's the tragedy. You ran off from hard-ruled Germany. You would not have stayed there by choice. You succeeded here and lived in peace and plenty. And by God, you take up with a lot of foreign riffraff and double-cross the people you owe so much. What's wrong with your mind? Think it over. And that's the last word I have for you." Smith, turning to his desk, picked up a cigar and lit it. He was calm again. There was a hint of sadness where his face had shown only fury. Then he addressed Arquette. "Stan, it's up to you now," he said. "As my superintendent and future partner, your word carries weight with me," Smith stated firmly. "I'm not sure what being square means in regards to this man." Smith sank into his chair and took a long drag of his cigar, puffing smoke into the air. Suddenly Arquette's voice boomed through the office. "Do you recognize me?" he demanded, staring down Newman. "No," Newman replied. "I'm Bert Arquette's son," Arquette announced. "My father just died a few days ago. He overworked himself fighting a fire caused by the IWW men, Stone's men. They burned our wheat and ruined us." Newman looked shocked at the news of his old friend's passing, but he remained silent. "Do you deny being involved in Stone's plot to kill Smith?" Arquette pressed. Newman shook his head. "No," he replied. "You're a liar," Arquette shouted. "I saw you with Stone and my father. I followed you out to Wheatley along the railroad tracks and heard the whole plan. I even snatched the money from my father." Newman's nerve faltered, but he still stubbornly denied the accusations, stuttering incoherently. "Stone has already been hanged," Arquette continued. "A vigilante group has formed in the valley. People like you won't be safe, regardless of your plot against Smith. But even if that weren't the case, your reputation would be ruined. The people of the West don't tolerate traitors. Now you have a decision to make. Will you take the risks or sell out and leave the country?" "I'll sell out," Newman replied sullenly. "What's your price for the ranch?" Arquette asked. $100,000, Newman replied. Smith shook his head. "That's too much," he said. "$75,000 is a fair price." "Newman will give you $75,000 for your land," Arquette declared. "Do you accept?" "I have no choice," Newman grumbled. "You do have a choice," Arquette insisted, "and you're not being cheated. I've just stated the facts. You're finished in this valley. Your fate is sealed, and Stone's destiny is staring you in the face." "So, are you going to sell and leave the country?" Arquette asked with a tone of finality. With a deep sigh, Newman replied, "Yes." His answer was forced out of his stubborn heart. "All right, then, draw up the deeds and let us know," Arquette instructed. Jake opened the door, and Newman left slowly and stolidly, just as he had entered, looking like a giant man in a battle with his own thoughts. "Make sure he gets home in the car," Smith called out as Newman left. Chapter 23. Marcia Smith experienced 2 days of pure happiness, only to be followed by misery when she remembered her troubles. On the 3rd morning, her father invited Arquette to help with the wheat harvest. However, Arquette seemed to be reminded of something unpleasant when he heard her father's words and quickly made an excuse to leave. Marcia's father noticed his behavior and asked her what was wrong. Marcia replied that she didn't know of anything that could be bothering him. Her father then asked if everything was settled, and Kathleen interrupted by teasing Marcia about her blushing. Despite feeling embarrassed, Marcia laughed along with them. Later, her father invited her into his room, and she followed him in. He closed the door, and she ran into his arms, hiding her face. Emotionally, her father exclaimed, "Well, I'll be doggoned," as he held her and patted her shoulder. He asked her to tell him what was wrong. She replied softly that there was little to tell, except that she loved Arquette and he loved her. She had been madly happy despite her troubles. Her father asked dubiously if that was all. "Is that all?" Marcia asked with a hint of frustration. "But just because Arquette loves you doesn't mean he won't go to war," Smith replied. Suddenly, bitter memories flooded Marcia's mind. "Ah," she whispered. "Good Lord, Marcia, you mean you and Arquette have been alone all this time and you haven't talked about the war?" Smith asked in disbelief. "Yes, how strange. But something happened and we forgot," Marcia replied dreamily. "Well, go back to it," Smith demanded. "I need Arquette's help. He's a wonder. He saved the situation for us here in the valley. Every rancher I know is praising him high. And he treated Newman fairly. And here I am with 3 big wheat ranches on my hands. Marcia, you have to keep him home." "Dad, I can't," Marcia replied. She felt a change within herself. "I never thought of keeping him from going to war since we confessed our love. But it's made a difference. It'll kill me to let him go, but I'd rather die than ask him to stay home." "I don't understand you, girl," sighed Smith. "But I respect your feelings. It's a mess. I forgot about the war while chasing off those IWWs. But we have to deal with it. Send Arquette to me." Marcia found Arquette playing with Kathleen. The two had grown close like siblings. "Stan, Dad wants to see you," Marcia said seriously. Arquette looked surprised, and his playful expression changed to one of concern. "You told him?" he asked. "Yes, Stan. I told him what little I had to tell," Marcia replied. Arquette gave her a strange look before slowly making his way to Smith's study. Marcia tried to be patient as she waited. As Marcia listened to her father's deep voice and Arquette's passionate response, she couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Smith, her father, was determined to keep Arquette in the wheat business, and Marcia couldn't understand why she wasn't praying for his success. She knew she was being selfish, but the thought of sacrificing her own happiness terrified her. Arquette spent over an hour with her father, and when he emerged, he was white as a sheet. Marcia had never seen his eyes so intense as when they met hers. "You," he exclaimed, wiping his face. "Your father has my poor old dad, what does Kathleen say, skinned to a frazzle." Marcia was anxious to know what had been said, but Arquette seemed sad as he replied, "A lot, and just as if I didn't know it all better than he knows. The importance of wheat, his ranches, my future, the government's needs." And then he spoke of you, the heiress to many waters. He said you'd make the sweetest of wives, the truest of mothers. Oh, my God! Marcia turned away, shocked by his tragic passion. Arquette was silent for what felt like an eternity before adding, "And then he cussed me hard, as no doubt I deserved. But I said a lot, too." "Did you make it?" Marcia started to ask, but her words trailed off as she looked at him. He stood before her, a mix of radiance and sorrow on his face. "I made it to where I am now, but feeling pretty dizzy," he replied with a smile. He took her hands in his and held them tightly. "Marcia, if I come back from the war with all my limbs intact, will you marry me?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes, yes, but please just come back alive, even if you lose something." He looked at her with concern. "It's a conditional proposal, Marcia. You shouldn't have to marry half a man." "I will marry you, no matter what," she declared fiercely, her love for him growing stronger with every passing moment. As she gazed at him through teary eyes, he pulled out a ring from his pocket and slid it onto her finger. "It fits. My mother's ring, Marcia," he murmured softly, kissing her hand. Kathleen, Marcia's sister, watched with wide eyes as Arquette announced their engagement. "It's perfectly grand," she squealed, throwing her arms around him in delight. "But why go to war when you could just marry Lenore?" Kathleen asked, her confusion evident. Arquette smiled at her gently. "I can't be a slacker, Kathleen, but don't worry, I'll come back to marry Marcia." They walked out to the fields, Arquette's gaiety and affection easing Marcia's worries. Despite the war looming overhead, they were able to find joy in each other's company, not caring about the world around them. "Hey, Marcia, someone might catch us," Stan warned. She was looking stunning today, and he couldn't help but express it. Marcia, however, dodged his attempt to block her way and ran away. She was quite agile and managed to evade his grasp even as he chased her down the lane and across the field. Finally, she found refuge behind a huge stack of baled alfalfa, but Stan caught up with her and pinned her against the stack. Marcia was more afraid of being caught by someone than of Stan's advances. "You're a cannibal," she gasped, trying to catch her breath, but her resistance was feeble, and Stan knew it. "You're a goddess," he replied, "the goddess of wheat and the very spirit of life. If anyone sees you manhandling me like this, I won't seem like a goddess to them. My hair is down to my waist, Stan," she protested. But it didn't matter to him how she looked or what they did. The only thing that mattered was his love for her. Suddenly, Marcia broke free and ran into the uncut alfalfa. It was thick, and her progress was slow. Arquette caught up with her and held her tightly by the shoulders. His grip was strong, and it made her struggle to break free. "You shall not hold me," she cried. "But I will. You must learn not to run," he retorted, wrapping his arms around her. "Now surrender your kisses meekly." "I surrender. But Stan, someone might see us. Let's go back or somewhere else," she pleaded. "Who can see us here but the birds?" he replied, holding her close. "You will kiss me enough right now, even if the whole world looked on," he declared, his voice ringing with passion. "Marcia, my soul, Marcia, I love you." He wouldn't take no for an answer, and Marcia didn't want to refuse him anyway. She wrapped her arms around his neck and returned his kisses with equal fervor. But as he tried to pull away, Marcia could feel the weight of his thoughts. Her heart swelled with emotion, almost too big to contain. She held onto his hand tightly as they walked across the field, over a babbling brook, and up a slope to a favorite spot of hers. Marcia needed to rest and composed herself, aware of his gaze upon her. The sun shone brightly, the sky a heavenly blue, and the world around them was a lush green and gold. A lark sang overhead, and a quail whistled in the brush below. The brook bubbled and murmured happily, while a soft breeze carried the scent of the harvest. Life was so full, so rich, so beautiful, so worth living. "Marcia, your eyes are like windows, and I can see into your soul. I feel uplifted and then saddened," he said, and she listened. This perfect day would be a source of strength for her in the future. She refused to let any bitter thoughts cloud her mind, and led him away, up the slope and across a barley field that had already been harvested, to the vast expanses of golden wheat. Engines and harvesters hummed far below while the wheat rustled and waved in the wind, towering above Marcia's head. "It's fine wheat," Arquette observed, "but the wheat of my desert hills was richer, more golden and higher than this." "No regrets today," murmured Marcia, leaning into him. There was magic in those words, the same enchantment that made time fly. She led him along the rustling bordered lanes wherever she pleased. From a distance they observed the active harvest scene, their gaze fixated on a grand, shiny combine with 32 horses trudging along. "I can control them, 32 horses," she proclaimed with pride. "No," he objected. "Yes, will you join me? I'll prove it to you," she challenged. "It's tempting," he admitted with a sigh. "But people are around. They'll ruin the moment." "Who cares about them?" she retorted. They spent the rest of the day on the windy slope, surrounded by the beauty and abundance of many waters. As the sun set, casting a warm golden glow over the hills, and the tired harvesters headed home, Marcia lingered, reluctant to end the enchantment. She knew he would soon reveal that he was departing. The sunset and evening stars' tranquility and magnificence filled Marcia's heart. She believed that there must be a life beyond the infinite space, and the disappointment of earthly aspirations was bearable. They walked back to the house hand in hand as the valley darkened with dusk. When they arrived, he gently informed her that he had to go. "But you'll stay the night?" she pleaded. "No, it's all set. They'll take me. My train arrives at 8. I've held it off until the last minute." They entered the house together. "We missed dinner," Marcia noted, although she wasn't thinking about food. She stopped with her head bowed. "I want to say goodbye to you here," she whispered, indicating the dimly lit entrance to the living room. "I'd like that too," he responded. "I'll grab my bag. Wait for me." Marcia walked slowly to the shadowy spot beyond the curtains where she had declared her love to Arquette. She stood there, praying and struggling to find the strength to let him go, to conceal her anguish. She knew that she had to let him go. Marcia realized that if he had told her earlier, she would have begged him to stay, but she couldn't stand in the way of his duty to himself. As he came down the stairs with his small bag, she saw the white face and burning eyes. Her woman's love made her realize that this was not a shock to his soul, but rather a man's strange spiritual accounting to his fellow men. He went into the dining room, and Marcia heard her family's voices in reply to his. Then he went to her father's study, and Marcia heard no sound. A motor car creaked and hummed past the window and stopped by the side porch. The door of her father's study opened and closed, and Arquette came to where she was standing. She kissed him and then went blind at the realization of loss. But she knew that she had the power to keep him at her side. She held him with a savage intensity of possession, but then let him go. "Marcia, I want you to think always how you loved me," he said. "Loved you? Oh, my boy, it seems your lot has been hard. You've toiled, you've lost all, and now—" "Listen," he interrupted. "The thousands of boys who go to fight regard it a duty. For our country. I had that, but more. My father was German, a traitor to our country. It's a horror to me that I have any German blood in me. I'll have to rid myself of it. But you've helped me realize that I'm American. I'll do my duty, whatever it may be. I couldn't have gone to war as a beast with my soul killed before even arriving, with no hope of returning. But you love me, can't you see the difference?" Marcia understood and saw the happiness in his eyes. "Yes, Stan, I know. Thank God I've helped you. I want you to go. I'll pray for you always. I believe you'll come back to me. Life couldn't be so cruel." She broke off, and he cried out in exultation, "Life can't rob me now, nor death. I have your love. Your face will always be with me, lovely and brave. Not a tear, only that sweet smile like an angel's. Oh, Marcia, what a girl you are." "Say goodbye and go," she faltered. She knew she couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "Yes, I must hurry," he whispered, drawing a deep breath. "Marcia, my promised wife, my star for all the black nights, God bless you and keep you. Goodbye." She spent all her strength in their embrace, giving him a passionate farewell kiss. Then she stood alone, tottering and sinking. His swift steps, now heavy and uneven, passed out of the hall. The door closed, the motor car creaked and rolled away, and the droning hum ceased. For a moment of despairing shock before the storm broke, Marcia blindly wavered there, unable to move from the spot that had seen the beginning and the end of their brief hour of love. Then she summoned the strength to drag herself to her room and lock her door. Alone in the merciful darkness and silence and loneliness, she need not lie or play false or fool herself. The truth was inconceivable and monstrous. She had let him go. Why? The deceiving spirit that had once made her brave was no longer with her, but despite this she was still a woman. She fell to her knees beside her bed, shuddering. This moment marked the beginning of her sacrifice, a sacrifice that she now shared with thousands of other women. Before she had only pitied them, but now she truly suffered. All that was sweet, loving, noble, and motherly, all that was womanly, rose up within her to face the gray future ahead. This future was filled with endless suspense and torturous fear, with a face of courage for the light of day and despair for the lonely night. But she had a vague faith in the lessons of life and a possible and sustaining and eternal hope in God. Chapter 24. Dear Sister Marcia, it's been a minute since I last wrote to you. My apologies, sis. I just haven't had the energy to put pen to paper. I've been relocated to a training camp not too far from New York, and I must say I'm not too fond of it. The air is different from what I'm used to in the high mountains of the West. It's raw and penetrating. The days are often gray and gloomy, and the rain never seems to stop. You'd think I had never seen rain before. Despite all that, the boys here are a fine bunch. We wake up at 4:30 a.m., and our first task of the day is sweeping the streets of the camp. To be honest, I'm glad to get up and sweep because I'm already near frozen before the sun even rises. Yesterday I peeled potatoes until my hands were cramped. Must have been about 9 million spuds. I'm currently wearing citizen's clothes that are too thin and sleeping in a tent on a canvas cot with just one blanket. It's not the most comfortable situation, but I wouldn't mind it so much if I had a real gun and some real fighting to look forward to. This life isn't for the faint-hearted, that's for sure. But let me tell you why I'm here. You know how I've always had a fascination with cowboys? Well, I've made friends with a big cowpuncher from Montana. His name is Anderson. Funny how things work out, isn't it? Anyway, that's all for now. I hope this letter finds you well. Yours truly, Andy Adams. His name was the same as mine, except for the last letter where I have an O. He's a Swede or Norwegian, but a true blue American? I highly doubt it. Just like all cowboys. He's a towering 6'4", broad as a door, with a flat head reminiscent of an Indian and a huge bulging chin. He's not exactly handsome, but let me tell you, he's one of the finest fellows that ever lived. We call him Montana. Our outfit had a lot of roughnecks, and I got in bad with them right away. I never was one to hold my temper. I got beaten up pretty bad, but Montana came to my rescue. That's how we became fast friends and gained even more enemies. One day, just outside of a small town where they'd been drinking, we ran into 6 of those roughnecks. I didn't know any of their names. We weren't acquainted at all. They got fresh, and I had to start something. I laid one of them out, and then it was a full-on fight. I got laid out myself, but I could still see what was happening. Montana didn't seem to need any help. One by one, he piled them up in the road with just one swing each. But the one I hit came to and grabbed a pick handle. He hit Montana over the head with all his might. It was an awful crack. Montana went down, and there was blood everywhere. They took Montana to the hospital and sewed up his head. It wasn't long before he seemed okay again, but he told me he sometimes felt weird. Then they put us on a troop train with boys from California and all over, and we headed east. I haven't seen any of those other cowboys from the West since we arrived here. One day Montana collapsed without warning and was paralyzed. They took him to a hospital in New York where the doctors said he had no hope and was getting worse. However, a New York surgeon advised an operation, and they found a splinter from a pick handle stuck in his brain. They removed it, but every day they expected Montana to die, yet he didn't. I went to see him, and it broke my heart to see him unconscious part of the time and crazy the rest. None of his right side moves. It's not fair. Why couldn't that hit have been on the Kaiser's head? This war is making me sick. I enlisted to fight, not to be sent to a place with a climate that doesn't agree with me or to sweep roads and juggle a fake gun. There are many things, but I shouldn't complain. I feel so far away from you all, but I'm closer to France. I hope you're doing well and staying strong, Marcia. Remember, you're Dad's pride and joy. I was the black sheep, but tell him I don't see my transfer as a disgrace. The officers didn't, and he shouldn't either. Give my love to Mother and the girls and tell them not to worry. Maybe the war will end before I can write again, but I'll try my best. Your loving brother Jim. Camp, October. My dearest Marcia, if my handwriting is messy, it's because my hand shakes with emotion when I write to my beloved fiancé. It's been weeks since I last wrote to you, and I apologize for not keeping in touch more often. I hope you can understand why I haven't given you a definite address. I didn't want to be part of the Western Regiment for reasons that are hard to explain. Instead, I enlisted in New York and have been trying my best to get into the Rainbow Division. There's nothing special about being in a top-notch regiment, but it seems like this one will be the first to see action among all American units. I have no desire to become an officer either. I wish I could write you letters that would be free of my own troubles, ones that you could treasure even if I never return. But it's hard to separate myself from the constant memory of you and that other terrible thing that I won't mention. Everything else seems mechanical to me. The work and training aren't difficult, even though many of the boys find it challenging. You know I grew up on a farm, so I'm used to hard labor. I can still see the brown fallow hills and the great squares of gold in my mind's eye. But thoughts of home are rare, as they hurt too much. I can't think of anything related to my training that I want to tell you, but I must mention that we have different instructors, and some are more effective than others. There's one that makes the boys laugh, but he's an ordeal for me. He tickles them, and they like him. During our first bayonet practice, our instructor had us yell, "God damn you, German, die," while rushing and thrusting a stuffed bag. I doubt this was common practice in Army exercises, but it's how he started us off. I can't forget those words. Every time I charge with a bayonet, they silently and terribly spring to my lips. This was the reality in 1917, a sad and incomprehensible truth. My spiritual and reasonable sides, once filled with hope, revolt at this actuality and its meaning. Yet there's another side of me, a dark one, that revels in anticipation. It's the caveman in me waiting to slay with a bludgeon. I'm starting to notice a gradual change in my comrades. I thought I was the only one suffering a regression, but I have a deep sense of baseness that keeps me apart from them. I feel alone with my own soul, but strangely attuned to my fellow soldiers' thoughts. It shocks me, makes me wonder, and forces me to doubt myself. Maybe it's my peculiar way of looking at things, but Marcia's appeal to me still rings in my ears. I try to see God, but my morbidness and limitations hold me back. Maybe I'll face him in the valley of the shadow. One thing I do see is the divinity in men. To give up everything, work, property, friends, family, and love, to fight for country and honor is truly divine. It's beautiful and inspiring, lifting a man's head high. When a man decides to become a soldier, he may think it is a noble and divine calling. But once he is faced with the harsh reality of war, he realizes that he must change in ways that are far from divine. He must become hard, merciless, and callous. He must forget his tender-hearted nature and his love for life. It is a sacrifice that is required to become a good soldier, but it is a sacrifice that is far from divine. I see many young men in this camp who are struggling with this sacrifice. They were born as natural sufferers and cannot bear to inflict pain on others. The silent cries of protest and agony that must go up in the night are countless, and if voiced, they would be a clarion blast to the world. It is sacrifice that is divine, not the making of an efficient soldier. As for me, I find solace in writing. It relieves me of the burden of all this unintelligible consciousness. I feel like I am going to be every soldier and every enemy, but despite that feeling, I am alone in a horde. I make no friends, and I have no way to pass my leisure but writing. I cannot forget what I am here for, and I cannot forget that soon I will face death. The other boys amuse themselves in 100 ways, but I cannot do any of those things. I am concerned with my soul and fighting the black passion that makes me a sleepless watcher and thinker. Amusement and forgetfulness are a thing of the past for me. I am training to kill men, and that is a terrible, strange, and vague thrill that sends shivers down my spine. I hope I live long enough to understand the meaning of this war. Maybe it's the meaning of life, but that seems unattainable. However, there must be some sort of spiritual growth or regression happening beneath the surface. Who knows? When I ask myself what I'm fighting for, the answer is my country as a patriot, my hate, and as an individual. My time is almost up. I'm going on duty. The rain is pounding on the roof. It rains so much here in the east, days and nights of rain. I can't help but think of my desert hills, always barren and yellow, with dust clouds swirling. One day of this rain, useless and wasted here, would have saved the bend crop of wheat. Nature is almost as mysterious as God. Marcia, goodbye for now. Think of me, but not as lonely or unhappy or uncomfortable out here in the cold, raw, black, wet night. I will have a spirit beside me as I walk my post. I've left unhappiness behind me. Rain, mud, or chill won't faze me. Yours with love, Stan Arquette. Camp, October. Dear Sister Marcia, after your last letter, I couldn't do anything else but send another pin like the one I sent Kathleen. I've included it. I hope you wear it. I'm curious to see what's in the package you sent. It hasn't arrived yet. All the mail comes late, and it's making the boys angry. The weather hasn't been as wet lately, but it's colder. These tents aren't heated. We grin and try to look happy. It's not cheerful hearing the morning call and getting up in the cold gray dawn. Hey, I have 2 blankets now. 2. There's just enough time for mess before we hit the road. Looks like I'm in the artillery now. The air service was really what I wanted, but you don't always get what you want in this business. It's Saturday, and I'm going to break this letter up into sections. There's no point in sending you little bits of news here and there. I'll write when I can and send it when it's a decent size. Your package arrived, and I was thrilled. I think I slept better on your little pillow last night than I have since we were called out. My pillow before was just your sleeveless jersey. It's after 3 in the morning, and I'm on guard duty, specifically battery guard. I have to be up from midnight until Reveille, not at a post, but in my tent, so that if any of my men, I'm a corporal now, get into trouble, they can call me. Non-coms go on guard duty once every 6 days, so about every 6th night I get no sleep. We've been ordered to get rid of all personal property except for our shaving kits and absolutely necessary items. We can't have footlockers, trunks, suitcases, or even soap boxes in our tents. Everything has to go in one barrack bag, which is basically a canvas laundry bag. Please thank the girls for the silk handkerchief and candy they sent. They really are the sweetest sisters a guy could ask for. I never realized how much I appreciated them until now. And tell Mother I'll write her soon. Thank her for the pajamas and napkins, but let her know that a soldier has no use for either. This morning I did my laundry for the past 2 weeks and was so busy that I didn't hear the bugle blow. That landed me on the Black Book, which means no time off any time soon. Before I forget, Marcia, I want to let you know that I've taken out a $10,000 life insurance policy from the government with you as the beneficiary. It only costs me about $6.50 a month, and if I kick the bucket, well, I'm a soldier now. Let Rose know I bought her a $50 Liberty Bond from the latest issue. I'm paying it off at $5 a month, and it'll be hers in 10 months. Both of these expenses come straight from my government pay as a soldier. The cash my old man sent me went down the drain. I loaned it out to the guys, spent it like it was nothing, and wasted it. Tell him not to send me any more. It's time for Jim Smith to step up and take responsibility. My dad's loaded, and he's the best dad any rascal could ask for. I'm going to prove a few things on this trip. We hear all sorts of rumors, but they never come true. One of them is that there are so many wealthy men with political connections in our unit that we'll never make it to France. Can you believe that? I'd love to meet these rich guys, but with 30,000 soldiers here, we're not buying it. We've also heard that we're being sent down south. I hope that's true. It's freezing, boring, and dreary up here. My buddy Montana pulled a fast one on us. He didn't die. He's hanging in there. He woke up recently and told me he can't feel anything on his left side except for an occasional prickly sensation in his hand. But Montana will never be the same again. That fantastic cowboy. Sometimes it makes me sick to think about how different this war is from what I imagined it would be. Anyway, I gotta go. Love to everyone. Jim, New York City, October. My dearest Marcia, it's been a while since I've received a letter from you. I know the mail service isn't the best, but it seems like it's taking forever for your letters to reach me. It's funny, you're the only one who writes to me. Jeff, my farmhand, only writes back when I write to him first, which I haven't done yet. I'm currently on duty at an armory bazaar in New York. It's ironic, really. I wonder why the officer chose me for this duty. But I'm not one to complain about orders, so I'm toughing it out. A few of us, the Husky boys, were sent over here for no apparent reason other than to show off our uniforms at a woman's bazaar. The event is being held to raise money for war relief work, and the hall is almost as large as the field behind your house. Every night it's packed with people, mostly young ones. My comrades are having a good time, but I feel out of place. However, I'm learning something new every day. If I wasn't so disgusted, I'd consider this a wonderful opportunity. But at the moment, it's just an experience that I have no control over. New York is an overwhelming place. The streets are endless, narrow, and torn up with crowds of people, cars, and taxicabs. The noise and dust are suffocating. The people look wild, as if they're in a hurry to go somewhere, but they don't know where they're going. I don't have the time or inclination to explore New York, but I think I would enjoy it under different circumstances. People in the East seem strange to me, but I can't say for sure if they're different from Western people since I didn't mingle with many people back home. I hope to hear from you soon. Yours truly, Andy Adams. I reckon that's how it is. During my travels to Spokane, Portland, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, it didn't seem like folks were too bothered about the war. Denver residents didn't even seem to know there was one going on. But here in New York, it's all anyone can talk about. The war is consuming everything and everyone. It's going to affect the rich and the poor, the neutrals and the belligerents, the pacifists and the militarists. I've been trying to keep up with the news, but it's hard to stomach. The pacifists are babbling nonsense, and the military experts are spouting off numbers and figures like that's all that matters. But neither side seems to understand what this war is doing to the human spirit. It's like they're all just machines, devoid of any soul. Maybe that's just how the German minds work. But what I really want to talk about are the women and girls I've been seeing here in New York. Everywhere I go, I see how the war has thrown them off balance. I've studied women of all classes, and I gotta say, Marcia, it's not pretty. I've been debating whether or not to tell you the truth, but I feel like it's my duty to let every American girl and mother know what's really going on. And here's the truth. Every soldier should be kept away from women for the duration of the war. I know that's a bold statement, but hear me out. These boys are facing peril long before they even get to the trenches. They're going to be tempted by the rottenness of the big cities and the vice-filled camps. Not all of them will fall victim to it, but enough will that it's a real problem. So that's what's been on my mind lately. I hope you're doing well, Marcia. Take care. The military, the government, the police, and the YMCA are all fighting against the evils that exist, but they will never be able to completely eradicate them. I won't say much about the society women who are pursuing officers, as there may be a few with good intentions, but most are likely influenced by the war and following a new trend. I also won't say much about the common women and girls who chase after soldiers on the streets. While their actions may seem bold and raw, they may be unconsciously motivated by something deeper. What I want to focus on is the strange behavior of many well-educated, refined, and good women. There is something unbalanced and incomprehensible about their frank conduct and the eagerness and restlessness of nice girls in unnatural situations. Just the other night, a woman in her 30s, dressed stylishly and with a wedding ring on her finger, approached me with a radiant smile and asked me to dance. Despite there being 500 couples already dancing and the loud music making it difficult to hear her, she persisted and said she would teach me. When I explained that my mind was focused on the dance of death I would soon be learning in France, she grew angry and snapped at me. Later, I watched her flirt and dance with an officer. It's clear that these behaviors won't be stamped out completely, but we must continue to fight against them and strive for a better society. Countless women have made advances towards me, ranging from straightforward propositions like the one from that woman, to more subtle gestures that are hard to put into words. And Marcia, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I've been swarmed by girls. They have countless ways of letting a soldier know how they feel, but I'm not entirely sure what they mean. I'm positive that the vast majority of soldiers don't understand either. At night, I listen to my comrades talk about their experiences, and I can't help but think that the girls would be shocked if they knew what was being said. Many times I have to walk away from these conversations, and when I can't, I just refuse to listen. But Marcia, I want you to know that I'm only talking about nice girls. I'm very particular about who I spend time with. There are many girls who are like you, but none quite as beautiful. You know, there are certain qualities that really set a nice girl apart. For the past month, I've been sent to different events for soldiers. At one place, a woman got up and invited the girls to ask the boys to dance. At another, a group of girls were lined up wearing different colored ribbons, and the boys had to find the girl wearing the ribbon that matched their own. It was interesting to see the eager, mischievous, and sometimes desperate looks in these girls' eyes as they waited to be chosen. It was just as interesting to see the boys' faces when they found out who their partner was. Some of them were proud when they got someone they thought was a winner, while others were disappointed when they got someone they thought was ugly. It was all an adventure for both the boys and the girls, but I saw something else in it, too. Whenever I found myself in the company of a girl, I made an effort to be charming and discuss topics like war, soldiers, and current events. I didn't dance, of course, and some girls probably thought I was a bit odd.